Boker Tov. Today's daf yomi is Kesubos, Kuf Yud Kesubos 110. We're going to start at the second Mishnah on daf Kuf Yud Amid Aleph as we march until the end of this beautiful tractate. Shnayim Shotziu Shtarcho Zel Zeh. Two people bring out notes on each other that the other one owes them money. Admon Omer, Admon says. So basically what's the story is that one person borrowed money, lent Shimon money on January 1st, and Shimon lent Reuven money on February 1st. So Ammon says that Shimon can say to Reuven, if you're correct, if I really borrowed money from you on January 1st, why would you be borrowing money from me back in return? You would just take back the money that I owe you. So therefore, clearly, what he's saying is that your document is false. Chachamim said each one can collect the note from their friend. Each one has a valid contract, they can collect the note. So in my we learned Shnaim Shotzio Shtarcho Zalzeh. Let's say if two people have notes on each other. And Nachman Omar Zegova Bezegova. Nachman says, presumably like the Chachamim, each one can collect. Whereas Roshesha says, what's the point of that? Why are you switching shoulders from one bag to another? Why are you switching bags from one shoulder to another? It's the same bag. You're not accomplishing anything. So each one retains their own note. Mar says the Kuli Alma, everybody's other position. Let's analyze this dispute between Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes. Everyone's other position. Idis v'idis, beinunis v'beinunis, ziboris v'adei efluchem mitrasa. Everybody's other position that if it's the same type of land, that there's three classes of land. There's Edis, which is number one, class A, Beinunis is average, and Ziboris is class C. Everybody's of the position that if they're both the same types of land that they're switching, you're just switching bags from one shoulder, you're just switching the bag from one shoulder to another. That there's no dispute. Even Rav Nachman would admit that. Kipuigi, where is there a dispute? Islay lachad Beinunis, lachad Ziboris. There's only a dispute where one of the parties has the average land and the other one has the worst land. Why? You're supposed to pay the debt from the Beinunis land. So Rav Nachman Savar, Zegova v'Zegova. Rav Nachman says each one collect from the other one because Savar, he's in a position b'shalohin shaman. When we decide what's a Beinunis property versus what's a Edis versus what's a Ziboris, the way we do that is we look at it vis-a-vis your own properties. So the person who has the inferior property will come, the Gavilela Beinunis, and he'll go in to collect the property from the other person whose is average property. But vis-a-vis the person who had the inferior property, it's his best property. And now Shimon is going to come, Vishakos Ziboris. He's going to only get the Beinunis of this other person, which is really a Ziboris. Objectively, it's a Class C property. And so therefore, he says it makes sense why you could say that they have to switch, each collect alone the note. Rav Sheshes says you're just switching the bag from one shoulder to another. You're not accomplishing anything because these are the position. Because Savar b'shekol adam shaman. He says no. When you evaluate the Beinunis, the Edis, and the Ziboris, you evaluate it on the basis of every person. So in the end, when Shimon would come to recollect his property, he says, I'm going to take what's an objectively Beinunis property, and I'll just take back his own property. So the Gemara says, yeah, fine, let's go back to Rav Nachman's approach. Rav Nachman, my chazis, how do you know that the Baal Ziboris is the one who makes the claim first, and then he gets the average property from Shimon? Let's say, why don't you say that Shimon, who's the Baal Beinunis, why don't you say he came first and he grabbed the other guy's property, the Ziboris property, Ziboris or other, anyway. And then he'll grab the Ziboris property, and then when he'll come back, he'll say, yeah, take the Ziboris back, and then he won't accomplish anything. Gemara says, yeah, you're right. That's the Gemara's first approach. Yeah, okay, it only makes sense where the person who has the Ziboris makes the claim first against the guy who has got the bait on his property. But the Gemara says, but but in the end, they're both going to come to the court at the same time with competing arguments. So that's not going to work either. So the Gemara says, okay, what are we referring to? The Islay Lechad Idis Ubeinonis. One guy has Idis properties and Beinunis. He's class A and class B. The Islay Lechad Ziboris. And the other one only has Ziboris. Mar Savar. So the other guy only has class C. So Mar Savar. So Rav Nachman's other position, B'shalohein Shaman, that we look at it subjectively. Mar Savar B'shal Kol Adam Hein Shaman. Shesha says we look at it objectively. So according to, so therefore, since we're going to look at it under those circumstances, that what's going to happen? We'll look at Rashi. So Marasav below Bishaloin Shaman. Rashi says, and therefore you're not just switching the bags from one shoulder to the other. Because one way or the other, the Baal Ziboris, the owner of the Class C property, is going to have a benefit. Because let's say his friend will come first and grab it. Well, then the Baal Ziboris can come back and collect from the Idus Beinunis and Ziboris. So Migbeilach Beinunis will collect the average one. And if he comes along and collects it, Beinunis Avigabe, he'll come and collect. He will come and collect the Beinunis and Avigabe Idus Migbeilach Ziboris. And so therefore, this Beinunis that he collects will be, with respect to him, a Idus, and so he'll give him the Ziboris. So the guy who is the Ziboris property will always benefit. But if you're just doing it objectively, then he's only going to give up the Ziboris property. He's always going to he's going to give back the Beinunis property if he claims a Beinunis. So therefore, that's the dispute. Gemara says, and Tanan, let's bring a proof from our Mishnah. Let's bring a proof from our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah say? Zego v'zegoma. So this is a question against Rav Sheshes, because Rav Sheshes says, why do we need to switch the Hafuche Matrasa Lamali? Then why do we need to switch the bags from one shoulder to another? So it's a question from our Mishnah against Rav Sheshes. So Tiragama Rav Nachman, I'll leave with Rav Sheshes. Rav Nachman, even though Rav Nachman could have said, I'm correct here, I got a kash on Rav Sheshes, Nachman doesn't say that. Rav Nachman gives an answer that what would Rav Sheshes say? He says, I'll answer for Rav Sheshes. Could go in Shalov Zela Eser Zela Chamesh. He said one guy borrowed it for 10 years, and the other guy borrowed it for 5 years. So Reuven borrowed money from Shimon for 10 years. Shimon comes back and borrows from Reuven for 5 years. So Gemara says, wait, let's see, what's the order in which it happened? Let's say Reuven borrowed first for 10 years, and then Shimon comes back and borrows for 5 years. Why would Admon say in this case, if I owed you the money, why would you borrow from me? Yeah, I owe you the money, but only in 10 years, and you need the money right away. Must be Reuben borrowed for 5 years, and then Shimon comes along and borrows it back for 10 years. Well, that doesn't make sense. If its time is up, after 5 years, my time with the Rabbanan, what's the reasoning why the Rabbanan would say that they each collect? Why would he borrow under those circumstances? His time is up. And if its time is not up, my time at the Amno. So the Gemara says, how are we going to explain it? He comes on the last day of the 5 years. So he came on the very last day. And so therefore, he came to collect it, and he borrowed from him on that day that he completed his 5 years. So Mar Savar of it in Ishtiyazif Yome. One says that a person will borrow money for 1 day. Mar Sabaro of it inish the Yazif Yome. And the other position is that you're not going to borrow money for one day. And so therefore it's not logical to assume that that's the case here. The Gemara says, Rami Bar Chama gives a different answer. He says, Amar Hacha b'yasmi askina. He says, what we're talking about here is we're talking about orphans. The yasmi migva gave avuye lo magbina. That the orphans can collect the money from the other person, but they themselves can't be collected from. You can't make a claim against the estate, against the orphans to collect from the property. And so that's what's going on from a note. You'd have to collect it from real estate. So that's what's going on. As we learned. So that's what they say is going on. Mara says, but it can't be that that's what we're talking about, because the Rabbanan say each one can collect from the other. If it's orphans, you can't collect from them from just a note. Road, and furthermore, I'll give you a perfect solution. Let him give the land to the orphans, and then he could turn around and collect from him. So let's say Shimon owes the orphans, and the orphans owe him money, and he wants to collect from them. He'll give the orphans real estate, and then he'll go collect from them. Like Rav Nachman taught, let's say the orphans collect the real estate from the debt of their father. So basically, their father was owed money, and they collected real estate. Then Balchov, then somebody who's a creditor against the estate can close it and he could collect. And he can go back and collect the real estate from them. So why don't we say that that's very obviously what could have been done here? So the Gemara says, Kasha. Okay, indeed, it's difficult. Gemara says, V'lukma de'islu yasme ziboris v'islei l'didei idis ubeinonis. Gemara goes, I'll give you another possibility. Why don't we establish what we're talking about here is that the orphans have ziboris property, and the orphans and the person who they're in a dispute with, or they have a note against, and he has a note against them. This person has idis and beinonis. He has class A and class B. To Azli Yasmi Gavu beinonis. So the orphans went ahead and they collected the average property. Umagbuei ziboris, and they paid him only in ziboris property. Because even if you say we look at it objectively, and then therefore the other person should get from the orphans the beinonis property, we have a concept. You only collect from the orphans, only from the worst property. So therefore, the orphans can collect the beinonis, and then the other people will only collect the ziboris. The Gemara says, yeah, but when do you say you only collect from the ziboris property, where you haven't seized it first? But where he seized it first, tafas, and he takes it even from the average property. So therefore, Gemara says it wouldn't work under those circumstances. So the Gemara says, next Mishnah. Shalosh artzos l'nisuin. There are three types of lands as it relates to marriage, meaning to say, can you force somebody to move? Yehuda, Avar Yarden, and the Galil. The Judah, which is where Jerusalem is, the other side of the Jordan, and the Galilee. Emoti and Meir or Ir. So you can take. So there are three types of places. There's Kfar, village, Ir, which is like a small city, and a Krach, which is a big city. You can't force somebody, a husband or wife, can't force somebody to go from one city, from one Ir to another Ir in a different land. When we krach, or from a large city to another large city in a different land. But if it's in the same one of these three subdivisions, in one of these three areas, you can force. But in the same one of these lands, you could go from one ear to another ear, or from one krach to another krach on top of kuf yud on the base. But you can't force them to go from an ear to a krach, or from a krach to an ear. Also, motzian minava hara nava yafa. You can force somebody to go from a bad dwelling place to a nice dwelling place. But not from a nice dwelling place to a bad dwelling place. Rashbag Omer Afo Minava Ra'al Nava Yafa. He says you can't force them to go from a bad dwelling place to a nice dwelling place. Nava Yafa Bodek. Nava Hayafa Bodek. because the nice dwelling place is bodek. We're going to see what that is. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. I understand why you can't go from a krach to a city to bekrach shlichei kol mili, because in the krach, which is the largest of all the cities, you have everything, and be'ir lo shlichei kol mili. But in the city, you don't have everything. My time, and why can't you go from the krach to the ear? Excuse me, mi'ir lekrach, my time, but why can't you go from the small city to the large city? Isn't it better to be in the large city? Where says, Messiah Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, then Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, minayin sheyeshivas kracham kasha. He says, this is support for Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, who says, no, actually living in a large city, living in New York City, Tokyo, or Los Angeles, this is very kasha. This is not good. Rashi says, Rashi explains why. Everybody's living there. Vidochakin. And everybody's pressing on each other. The houses are right on top of each other. There's no air quality. But in the small city, Yeshkanos, Pardesim, in the suburbs, what do you've got? You got gardens and orchards, Smuchim Labatim. You got the gardens right next to your city. Vir and Yafa, you got beautiful air quality. This is what Rashi's saying. Okay, so that's why it's very hard to live. You can't force him to go from a small city to a large city. And how do we know this? How do we know living in a large city is hard? As it states, and it says in the book of Nehemiah, they had to give a special bracha to all the people who are willing to live in Jerusalem because it was a large city and it wasn't so shayach that people didn't want to live there. Rashbag says that even from a bad dwelling place to a good dwelling place, you can't force somebody to live because it's bodek. What does it mean, bodek? My bodek? He says, once you start moving around, you're traveling, you're moving, your stomach's going to start to hurt. You're going to get sick. Kesubos Sefer Ben Sira, it says, appears in the book of Ben Sira. Ben Sira, not one of the canonical books of the 24 books of Tanakh, but it's quoted several times in the Talmud. And it says in the Ben Sira says about the following pasuk. The pasuk says in Mishlei, Kol Yamei Ani Ra'im, all the days of the poor man are bad. How could that be? How can the poor man be bad on Shabbos and Yom Tov? Even when the poor man changes his diet, it's going to be tough for him. Ben Sira says, Af Lelos. Also, not only are the days bad, but also the nights are bad. Also, the nights are bad. How do we know that? Because it says, B'Shefel, Af Lelos, because it says, B'Shefel Gagim Gago, Marom Arim Karmo. In among the lowest of the roofs is his roof, and the highest of the mountains is his vineyard. Mimatar Gagim Gago. From the rain of the other roofs, it comes down on his roof. May Afar Karmo Mikramim, and the best of his earth goes to the other vineyards. So he's got the worst of both worlds. Says the Mishnah, Kol Mal and Laret Israel, you can force anybody to move to the land of Israel. You can force your spouse to move to the land of Israel, but you can't force them to leave. I call Mal and Yerushalayim, you can force anybody to leave to move to Jerusalem, but you can't force anybody out of there. Both men and women can force their spouse to move to Israel. Let's say you marry a woman in Israel, and you divorced her in Israel. Well, you pay her ksuva, Israeli currency. You married her in Israel and you divorced her in Kapotkia. You pay her from the money of the land of Israel. Let's say you marry her in Kapotkia and you divorced her in the land of Israel. Then you give her from the money of the land of Israel. Shimon Gamliel says, no salami kapotkia. You give her kapotkia money. If you marry her in kapotkia and you give her in kapotkia, no salami kapotkia. Then you pay her kapotkia. Kapotkia currency was considered better than Israeli currency. Says the Gemara, everybody can go up to the land of Israel. What's this coming to include? What do you mean everybody can force somebody to go to the land of Israel? Even slaves can say, I wanna go to the land of Israel. I don't want to live here in Babylon. The slave can force their master to move to Israel. Some have this explicitly written in the Mishnah. What's it coming to include then? Even to move from Beverly Hills to say, or Park Avenue, and say, I want to move to a little dinky town in the land of Israel with one bathroom and not the lap of luxury. Yep, you can do it. You can force them. But you don't want to. Everybody, you can't force somebody to leave the land of Israel. Somebody can say, I can force you, you can't make me leave. If a slave fled to the land of Israel, from outside the land of Israel to Israel, he can say, I'm not going back. We say to the owners that sell him here, and you go back. That's the importance of the mitzvah of settling the land of Israel.
That's a first pasuk in the Torah, no?
Yeah, we'll come to that at the end. So I call Malin Yerushalayim. Everybody. So we'll come back to Rabbi Yosef's question at the end because it's not. Kol Malin Yerushalayim. Everybody can go up to Jerusalem to include who? Even from a good dwelling place to a bad dwelling place. But you can't force anybody to leave Jerusalem. Even from a bad dwelling place to a good dwelling place, he or she can say, I'm not leaving. And because we said in the first clause, you can't leave, therefore we say in the second clause, you can't leave. Meaning to say, the second law was not necessary because if you can go up from a bad dwelling place from a good dwelling place to a bad dwelling place in Jerusalem, for sure you can't force them out of there. And so the Mishnah didn't need to say it. But the only reason why they say it is because we say it in the first clause. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan. So we have a Bryce that says, he says to go up. She says, I don't want to go up. We force her to go to the land of Israel. Otherwise, he divorced her without a ksuva. She says, I want to go up. But he says, I don't want to go up. We force him to go to make aliyah. Otherwise, he divorced her because they're ksuva. She says, I want to leave Israel. He says, I don't want to leave. We force her not to leave. Otherwise, he divorced her without a ksuva. He says, I want to leave. She says, I don't want to. We don't let him leave. If he doesn't want to listen, he has to divorce her and give her a ksuva. Nasa Isha, so the verse says, Agufa Kasha. We have a contradiction. Katani, Nasa Isha Be'eretz Israel, the Gersha Be'kapotka. For one end, it says, if you marry her in Israel and divorce her Kapotka, you can pay her from Israeli currency because you married her in Israel. Alma Basar Shibu doesn't, and we follow the place where you got married. But the next clause states, but if you marry her in Kapotka and divorce her in Israel, then we give her the Israeli money. Alma Basar Gubainasan, and we see from here we follow the place where you're collecting. So no, so this is a proof. This is the leniencies of ksuva because the Israeli currency is not as strong as the Kapotkian, and so therefore you say you can pay with the Israeli currency on either end, and because ksuva derabbanan. So the shita is of the position that ksuva is rabbinic, whereas Reb Shimon Gamliel says no salamimos kapotke. He says no, you have to give her from the Kapotkian money. That if you marry her in Kapotkian and divorce her in Israel, he says you have to give her Kapotkian money, which is worth more. Because Savra ksuba diarais. So Reb Shimon Gamliel is in the position that the ksuba is biblical. Let's say somebody takes out a note on their friend. Kesubos Bavel. Let's say the note says that it was written in Babylon. Mikbomimos Babel. Then you collect it from Babylonian money. Kesubos Eretz Israel. But let's say the note was written on it that it happened in the land of Israel. Mikbomimos Eretz Israel. You collect it with Israeli money. Kesubos Stam. Let's say it just doesn't say anything. Let's see about Babel. Mikbomimos Babel. If you take it out in Babylon, you collect it from Babylon. Let's see about Israel. Take it out in Israel, collect it from Israel. Mimos Eretz Israel. Kesubos Kesef Stam. Let's say you just write money. Then the borrower can pay with whatever he wants. But this is not the case with respect to Kesubos. So the Gemara says, well, what does that line mean? This refers back to the Reisha. The first clause, the first clause, that the money is collect from the place wherever the contract comes out. Fukimi the Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the Amar Ksuba the Oraisa. Shimon Gamliel says that you go after the place of the shibud, and you follow the place where they got married. So it says by Ksuba, it's not where the money was being collected, but it's where the money started from. Kesubos Kesef Stam. Let's say it just writes money, but doesn't specify. Whatever the borrower wants to pay, he can pay with. You mean you say you can pay with just like a silver bar? No, it says a coin. You can just pay with like a little, like it's like the smallest of all the coins. No, you don't make a pruta from kesef. Better off to live in Israel, even in a city where they're mostly idolaters. But don't live in Chutz La'aretz. I feel be Israel, even in a city majority Jewish. Even in Kiryas Yoel, a whole Jewish city. Whoever lives in the land of Israel is like somebody who has a god. Whoever lives outside the land of Israel, it's like somebody who doesn't have a god. It says, I will give to you the land of Canaan to be for you as a god. Whoever does not live in the land, does not have a god. To tell you that whoever lives outside the land of Israel, it's like they're worshiping idolatry. By David it says, that by David it states in David that he says, you divorced me, you told me to go worship other gods. But really, is that possible? Did anybody really tell David to go to worship other gods? Is that really possible? Whoever lives outside the land of Israel, it's like you're worshiping other gods. Rabbi Zera was hiding from Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Zera wanted to go up to the land of Israel and went to make Aliyah. But Rabbi Yehuda didn't want it because he said, over Basei. He says, if you go up, you're violating a positive commandment. As it states, go to Babylon and be there until I remember you, God says. Rabbi Zera says, no, that verse doesn't refer to people, that refers to klisharis, that refers to the vessels. Just want to say, today, what about today? So there's a lot of discussion. Is it a mitzvah to live in the land of Israel? Ramban says for sure is. Rambam doesn't cite it. And there's a lot of discussion. Are you obligated? We're going to see tomorrow the Gemara that Satmar Rebbe says is proof that you're not allowed to go back to the land of Israel today, certainly under the Zionist governments. But we'll look at this. The Tosfos here on our daf says, if he says to make Aliyah, he can force her to go. Tosfos says this doesn't apply nowadays. He's writing in the 12th century, in 12th and 13th century in northern France. It says it's dangerous. Rabbeinu Tam died in 1217. He taught that Rabbeinu Tam says nowadays don't. Actually, not Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen. We know Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen also appears elsewhere. He said you're allowed to become tamei. They went to his funeral even though it was a Kohen because that's that the tumah of the tzaddikim there's no tumah of the tzaddikim. So Rabbeinu Chaim says, "Achshav eino mitzvah l'dir Israel." He says nowadays it's not a mitzvah to live in the land of Israel. Ki kama mitzvos atulis ba'aretz. There's so many mitzvahs that are dependent upon the land. Become onshin, and there's so many punishments. We can't keep the mitzvahs properly. Better off not to live in the land of Israel. It's a controversial tosis of Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen. So, okay, we'll stop here. Oh, wait, I want to go back to Rabbi Yosef's question.